How's it going? Sorry. Good evening. So, I'll be honest, it's been a while since I've been at church. My wife and I, this last spring break, about 2 weeks ago, we went to Hawaii. So we've been gone a little bit, and then I just did some travel for work. So I can definitely say it's good to see you guys. Missed you. And I'm tired because we did this trip to Hawaii, and I knew I had this sermon coming up to prepare for on top of work, a little bit of school, being a dad, that's fun, and marriage, and all these things. And then we got back from Hawaii, and our son got really sick, so he's doing okay. But he's got a pretty good cold, so we're dealing with that, and that's where they're at tonight. So definitely prayers for them, help them both to feel better. They're both a little under the wind. But that's what's up with me. A little tired, but bear with me tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about or have a conversation, my least favorite kind of conversation, because it's a one-way conversation. I definitely prefer the two-way conversations where I get a little feedback. But we're going to do our best, and so here we are. And so tonight I'm going to discuss marriage, and we're going to go take a look at what the Bible's perspective on marriage is, and hopefully get some real application on how we can work and improve our marriages. And I'll be honest, I'm going to start out with some disclaimers, so bear through me. I think there's like 6 of them. That's a lot. It's kind of like that commercial where you get all that fine print up front. But some of you are probably thinking, this guy's a little young to be talking about marriage. I get it. I think it too. But here we are. So, let's go through these disclaimers. And honestly, I'm starting off with these disclaimers or apologies, whatever you want to call it, to kind of set the stage, because I don't want you to, get into the discussion tonight and turn your ears off because of my age, because of whatever. And whatever I say, I want you to try your best to keep your ears open and keep an open mind and heart. So let's start with the first disclaimer is a lot of this is not my own material. I have worked a lot recently. A lot of you actually know the podcaster John Deloney. I'd say he's a branch off of the Dave Ramsey network. So if you know Dave Ramsey, you can look him up, John Deloney. He's got a lot of history, experience with trauma victims, but then also working with couples who are in trouble and just working with people with mental health. And so that's how I found him, through Dave Ramsey. And maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But between my experience in marriage, which definitely brief, but also listening to him after the last couple of months, and he does a podcast on, people call in, they're like, hey, my marriage is in trouble or whatever. And he talks to them and helps them figure out what the next best thing to do is. And so I get great opportunity at work. Sometimes I do like math or whatever, and use this half of the brain, and this other half of the brain gets really bored, so I listen to stuff. And so I got a great opportunity to get to listen to him, and I can tell you for sure, some of you might actually know John Deloney or have heard him, and you might say, like, Donald's been listening to too much John Deloney. But I can definitely say it's helped me as an individual, and it's helped my marriage. And so that's one of the reasons I want to share some of it with you guys, so it can also help you. So another disclaimer. Yes, I'm young. Yes, I have some experience. No, I don't know everything. But I can see the wisdom from the Bible, and I can see the good and bad examples in front of me, and I can learn from them. And that's the best way, because then I don't have to do the same mistakes. And I do make mistakes, and my marriage is not perfect. But at the end of the day, I can say I'm really blessed because I have a wife who loves me and who I adore, and we can always work to have a good marriage no matter what we face in life. And we've been through some seasons. We've been married. We went through this today. We've been married a little over 2.5 years. We've known each other, I think, over 6 years. And basically, since we've known each other, I saw her and I was like, "Hey, I like you. You're cute." And so that's kind of our story. If you don't know, and so we've been around the block once or twice, and haven't been all through town, but we got some experience. Yeah, good and bad, right? And tonight, another disclaimer, I'm not talking at you, I'm talking with you. My hope is to strengthen marriages, to prepare people for marriage if you're not married, and if there's anyone struggling with marriage, give you some tools and words and things that can be used for healing. So tonight, whether you're married, whether you're looking to get married, hopefully you can get something out of tonight's lesson. Okay, so this is labeled disclaimer number 4. We're almost done. I know, I'm tired too, and you're like, this guy's crazy. We'll get there later. I know some of you know who John Deloney is. Oh, I think I already did this one out of order. That's fine. Let's skip to the next one, last one. So, last disclaimer. If I say anything you don't like, you don't agree with, come up after church and talk to me about it with me. I don't want to, I try to look at the Bible and make sure what I'm saying up here is in line with what God teaches. And I'm looking for some practical experience to hand out here tonight because that's what I've received recently. It's been really helpful. But I'm not here to upset anybody, to hurt anybody. So if you hear something you don't like or you don't agree with, come talk to me after church, and we'll get it figured out. I will also apologize about this one, and I didn't write it down. We're going to talk about the Bible because that's why we're here. But we're not going to do so much reading tonight. I'll reference passages and stuff kind of in quick reference, and that's just because I haven't had time to go through this and time myself, but I got like 8 pages of notes up here. So I'm not sure when we're going to be done, but we'll be done sometime. Yep, so Mike told me 25 minutes. We'll see how close we are. Yeah, so with that, after we've gone through all those disclaimers and you've all signed it on the dotted lines, we can start the lesson tonight. So tonight we're going to talk about marriage and discuss the truths and principles we can get from the Bible, and really look more at a practical application of those principles from the Bible and how to use them in our marriage. My wife told me not to use the word superficial because it might offend some people, but I couldn't find a better replacement. So if you can think of one, you come tell me what a better word to use is. But something I struggle with on many Bible studies or sermons is the subject matter. The study is kind of done in a superficial nature, and so often we'll study the Bible and we'll read passages and it says love one another, love God, be sacrificial for your wife, be a man of God, but we stop there. And maybe we go a little deeper and we say, well, you look at the passages and we say, well, the purpose of marriage is not only for the earthly benefits, but it's for the two of you to walk the path of faith together and ultimately point each other to God. And I can't say, that is the purpose of marriage, right? But that's often where studies stop, and that's kind of what I want to talk about tonight is what does the Bible say? What are these practical principles we can do? But what does day-to-day look like? What does, when hardships arise, how do we deal with those? I can speak from personal experience that in the past 2.5 years, life's been stressful, things come up, and I've chosen to deal with certain things, and I could become passive in other areas, and life just happens. And if I was to do the 2.5 years over again, right, experience 20/20 vision, I would do it differently. And I've had this opportunity now, entering a different season of life, to work on tools to prepare myself for the future, to strengthen my marriage so we can deal with similar hardships, stresses in better ways. And so that's what I've been working on, and I want to share that with you, and I hope you all can get some of that out tonight. And maybe tonight's like one of those eye openers, and you're like, hey, I gotta go home and figure it out too, or talk to somebody, right? And so often studies stop there. Bible studies can stop, kind of on that superficial level, and we miss out on the real world application of what the day-to-day looks like. How do I love my wife? And how do I sacrifice for my wife, right? What does that look like? And so 1 Corinthians 13, it talks about how you can understand all the mysteries, you can have all knowledge, but if I don't love, I gain nothing, right? And so I know the passage is talking about love, but I think it's also true kind of you say I'm right because I'm thinking I'm right, but the passage is talking about love, and it says that you can have all this understanding, but if you don't love, you're missing and you have no gain. And I think it's the same with some Bible studies. We can read the Bible, and it says to love your neighbor, love thy God, but we don't apply it. And so then, even if you have complete understanding of the Bible, but no practical application of it, it's useless to you, right? And Matthew 21:28-31 talks about, Jesus tells a parable of two sons, and the father gives instruction, right? We're given the Bible, and one son responds with, yes, I'll do what you have instructed me to do, but then he doesn't do anything. And the other son says, nah, I'm not going to do what you told me to do, but then he ends up doing what the instructions said. And Jesus basically poses to the Pharisees, which one did what the Father wanted? Well, obviously the one that eventually did what the Father wanted. And so I think it's important as we're studying the Bible, and I'm not trying to put anybody down here. We're blessed with a really good full-time minister and many others who, good smile, do great sermons and have that daily application, and break that down, and I'm very appreciative of that. So we have all these passages in the Bible that talk about marriage. We have this vessel, this institution created by God. But what does a loving marriage look like, and what does a godly marriage look like and feel like? Are we facing the present? Do we truly move past our biases to reflect about our marriage? Like, am I the problem? Is there stuff we need to work through? How do we have a better marriage? One of the top 5 most impactful spiritual moments in my life. You got things that are different impacts, right? But one of the top 5 was a gospel meeting when my family was living in Sodatna. Dr. Brad Harab, who works for Focus on the Press, was there doing a gospel meeting, and he's talking to us about different things Christians in America were facing. And one of those things was the divorce rate in America. And as someone who would later become a future engineer, one of the things that stood out to me was the graphs, right? Engineers love graphs, we're visual. And so the first graph he showed was the divorce rate in America for about the last 50 to 75 years. And so the graph showed over time, as the years were going by, the percent per year of divorces in America was increasing. And it was positive, if not steep, exponential. And you could look on there and you could see, it's going up, but then you'd see a big blip and it would kind of level out. And those blips, you could look at the dates when those happened, and it was like, the year the no-fault divorce law was passed, and divorce became really easy. You didn't necessarily have to have good reasons to get divorced. There's no fault, you can do whatever you want. And there wasn't, it just made it easier. And divorce is rampant in America. It still is today. And there was a little bit of hope, though, because in recent years, you'd look at the graph and it kind of plateaued, and you're like, oh, good. Maybe the church is doing its job. Teaching divorce is not the answer to problems in marriage, and that, when you marry for life, not until it's not convenient or whatever. And you look at that and you're like, good, the church is doing its job. But then he had another graph, and that graph was the percent of marriages in America. Down. No one's getting married anymore. Well, if you don't get married, you can't get divorced. So, problem not solved. We still got work to do. And more recently, or not more recently, but over the years, kind of after that discussion, I remember my mom asking the question, like, why is divorce happening more? And especially in the church. She would look at the church, and in her experience when she was younger, divorce was not as common in the church. Society has accepted divorce, and unfortunately the church has more readily accepted divorce as the answer to problems in marriage. And I would argue that society has lost the skills to have successful marriages. We don't know how to communicate. We don't know how to be devoted to one another. We don't know how to love, and all the good things that make a beautiful marriage. And you can see the devil is at work, because first he attacks society, and then he attacks the family unit, breaks down marriages, destroys families, and he uses it to attack the church by attacking the families in the church. And it is the devil at work, and the church needs to be working against it, and how they do that is by having good marriages. Maybe divorce is more accepted in the Christian group than it once was. But honestly, I think if you look, to solve a problem like divorce, you have to be not part of the problem. And I think the church has come to a point where over history, we taught really good. Divorce is not the answer. Like if you ask most Christians, they're going to tell you divorce is not the answer. But that's that super, like I was saying earlier, that's that superficial answer of divorce is not the answer. We end the conversation there, and we forget to say, how do we have a good marriage, right? And so one of the solutions to the divorce rate problem in America, I think, is having good marriages in the church. And retrospectively, as the church shows that example, it can show society how to have better marriages. And this is a plug for parents. I think the church, you have the idea of purity culture and all that, and staying pure and not necessarily equipping people for marriage. And as parents, we should be doing a good job of covering all aspects of marriage for young children, so that way when they reach the age to become married, they're ready for marriage. No one should have to do a crash course on marriage in like their engagement period or whatever. They should know how things work, right? So let's talk about divorce for a second. Well, we've been talking about it. Talk about it a little more. The Old Testament, God allowed Moses to grant a certificate of divorce, and that was full adultery. And so you have I've studied the concept of marriage, divorce, remarriage, and all that, and that's a conversation for another time. But if I'm being honest, I don't think there will ever be a point in history where there is no divorce. My personal belief is God had a purpose in allowing Moses to grant that divorce, even though God's plan is for people to be married for life. And the reason that is because if you have two people that are married and one of them is acting ungodly and not being like a faithful, today a faithful Christian, and being selfish, there could be abuse, there can be adultery, there can be all these things that a marriage won't work. And I think that's God's way of protecting his other faithful follower in that covenant relationship, and allowing them to separate and save the one who is being faithful, and not physically and spiritually endangering that person in that marriage trapped in there. So my personal belief is there is a time and a place for divorce, but as the normal principle, we should never teach that divorce is the answer. There is no room for divorce in a marriage between two individuals who claim to follow Jesus. Marriage is for life, and I think that church has been good at teaching that divorce is not the answer, but we need to be better at equipping each other for having good marriages. And so one of my favorite passages in the Bible is actually the book of Genesis. In the beginning, right? God created the earth. And God created all these things. God created light, and he said it was good. And God created like the bushes, and he said it was good. And eventually God creates man, and he says man is very good. And there's a difference. There's good, and then there's very good. We're kind of like God's special project, which is kind of cool. And God told us to not only subdue the earth, but he told us to benefit from us. I don't think God ever created earth for us to be miserable, for us to be what's the term? Suffering, right? I think God created earth for us to enjoy it, and our sin brought suffering into the world, and that God created us to enjoy earth and to prepare us for eternity with him. And so I think that's the same thing with marriage. God didn't create marriage to meet our earthly needs and to just point us to him spiritually, but God created us to enjoy marriage. Marriage doesn't have to be a cohabitation, a partnership of, hey, I can't do this on my own, I need some help, because you ever tried to raise kids by yourself, it's pretty hard, all that fun stuff. But God created marriage for us to enjoy. And that's kind of, a lot of people settle for mediocre marriages, and that's why we end up in divorce, because they're like, I'll just let my marriage happen to me. I'm not gonna put any work into it, whatever. But let's change the picture and ensure we are working to have good marriages. And I know this church is blessed. There's many people who have been married far longer than I have and have had good marriages. But we all know, if you've been married for any time, there's seasons to life, and things are more stressful at times, things are better at times. But really, we should all be working for, how do we still have a good marriage even when it feels like the world's on fire? How can we still love one another even when that person you're loving is maybe making your life a little more difficult at the moment, you know? Um, so with that, let's move into some of the more practical. I got some practical things we can talk about, little tools to put in your tool belt that I've picked up honestly from John, principles in the Bible, and I want to share my thoughts with you tonight. And hopefully those can be used either to help your marriage, to prepare you for marriage. Maybe you've been married, or maybe even as an individual, if you just want to, get a little better. I think it's all helpful, because we all struggle with the same thing. The devil's gotten really good. Is another great high point in my life spiritually, where someone said the statement: the devil's gotten really good at isolating us, especially in America, right? We're like the most connected society in the world, like in history, right? We can like pull a phone out of our pocket and call somebody across the world and connect with them, but we're also the most isolated. People don't know how to communicate, don't know how to have friendships, more or less marriages. And so it's important we work on those hard skills of communication, conflict resolution, all these things, so we can have good marriages. And yes, I'm young. Yes, I haven't figured everything out. Some of you are like, you only got one kid. Try having like 6, 8, 10. There's some 10 in here, maybe. I'm not sure. I get it. I got a long road ahead of me, but part of the season I'm in right now, and I appreciate it, and I'm thankful for the blessing, is I'm preparing for the future. So I have tools in my belt to deal with those stressful times. And I hope you all take that opportunity as well. So yeah, let's get into some of these. And so the first one, John says all the time, and it was very profound to me when he said it the first time, and I love it. I love when he says it all the time. He says, we speak in words, but we think in pictures. And what that means is, if I'm talking to my wife, if I'm talking to Peyton, and I say one thing, I say it in words, and I have an image in my head what that looks like, and then she hears it and she gets an image in her head what that looks like. And in marriage, right, either sometimes you guys have the same mental image, and sometimes you have two different mental images, right? So if Peyton was to tell me, sorry if I'm keeping everybody really late. I know I'll try to speed it up here. Where was I? Oh yeah. So if Payne tells me, comes up to me, and I'm sitting on the couch after work, watching TV or doing something, and says, "Hey, can you take the trash out?" And I say, "Yeah, I'll take the trash out," and then she walks off. We can have two different images in our head what taking the trash out looks like, right? It can be, I just worked a really long, hard, stressful day at work. It was a bad day, and I just need a moment to myself to sit on the couch, kind of decompress, relax, and then re-engage with the family. And so when I said I'll take the trash out, I really meant in like 20 or 30 minutes when I'm done, like decompressing. And her image is, right, is, hey, I got all this trash sitting over here that I need to get in the trash can, and the trash can's full, and I got a baby over here, and I'm trying to make dinner and do all this stuff, and I need you to do it now. And then I don't do it, and then, she's mad, rightly so, because she had an image, and I had an image, and so the need that was there didn't get met. And it wasn't like I'm like trying to be selfish and like not take the trash out. It was generally we had two different ideas of what taking the trash out meant. And so John says one of the solutions to having different mental pictures is, can you paint me a better picture? And so if you think there's a chance in your marriage where someone says something and there might be room for misinterpretation, there might be room for different pictures, say, can you paint me a better picture, right? So if Peyton comes up to me and says, hey, can you take the trash out? And I can respond with, oh yeah, do you need me to do that right now, or can it wait 20 minutes while I'm trying to decompress? And so that's one practical application of, you know, as far as I know in the Bible, there is no verbiage on how you take the trash out, but um, there is practical application of, the man's supposed to be is supposed to sacrifice for the wife, and so maybe I do need to give up my decompression time to get up and take the trash out and make that sacrifice, work a little harder, and meet my wife's needs, right? And so that's kind of how the practical application of principles. So another solution is learning to set healthy boundaries, right? We all got friends, we all got extended family, and we all got work, we all got life obligations outside the family unit. And one of the things that a healthy marriage needs is boundaries, both in the marriage and outside the marriage for those around you. And so you can't expect people to keep your boundaries if you never tell them what your boundaries are, right? So like, I didn't think of any examples, so I'm not gonna try, and we got no time. But if we're not gonna go there, you guys get the point. All right. So next, most of these are leaning kind of on communication, because as a society, we've lost, like I said before, we've lost the skills to communicate. So often in marriage, your marriage starts to fail or have problems because you're just not communicating, and we don't know how to communicate. So it's time that we learn how to communicate. And maybe you can learn that yourselves on your own. Maybe you can do like what I did, and I've been listening to this podcast kind of 5 days a week, and as often as I can. Sometimes it takes me 8 hours to get through a half an hour podcast because I know it's important, but it's got to happen. Or maybe you guys need, maybe, and I think I missed this one probably earlier, but one of the tools in marriage is third parties. Sometimes we as a couple don't have the ability, the capacity to work through things ourselves, and you need intervention. You need a third party, and so maybe you need to meet with a therapist, or we're blessed in this church. We got a great minister, we got elders, we got your brothers and sisters to talk with and figure things out. You don't have to do it by yourself. And I was in my self-reflection preparing for this, I was thinking, and I realized Payne and I have been married for 2.5 years. And in 2.5 years, I have never once asked somebody for really advice about my marriage. And we've had our difficulties. We've gone through really hard things in life. And I have never sought help outside basically my own understanding and talking to her about our marriage. And that, honestly, that's not okay. We were never made to be isolated, do-it-yourself people. We were made to be part of a community, made to be part of a church family. And that's why God has granted us these gifts, these blessings, and we need to use them. So we need to have a better understanding of togetherness, a team. The Bible teaches the creation order. The husband is created, and he's the head of the house, the head of the marriage, and the wife needs to submit to the marriage. And there's passages that talk about that. And like wives to submit to the husband as the church submits to Christ, and you get that beautiful picture. But Jesus also died for the church, right? And so he was sacrificed himself for the church. And in the same way, a husband needs to be willing to sacrifice for his wife. And so I'm not going to get into it, but what does that look like? What does sacrificing for your wife look like? From what I've seen and experiences, I've seen it go both ways. Life's kind of, you kind of explain life by pendulums, right? You have bell curves, but then you also have a pendulum. Things swing both ways. And I see it swing both ways, where you have some wives who try to claim leadership, maybe they shouldn't have it, or maybe they're looking for freedoms that they shouldn't have because they agreed to be in a committed relationship and to submit to their husband. But I've seen the other, so that's over here, and then I've seen it swing the other way, where husbands are like, I'm the boss. And that's not okay, because yes, you are the leader, but you are supposed to sacrifice. And I kind of love Proverbs 31, 11 through 12. Dave Ramsey talks about it all the time, and it's, let's go ahead and, you guys can look it up, okay? So Proverbs 31, 11 through 12. It talks about that a wife is like more precious than gold and rubies, and that she's super wise and can share that wisdom with her husband. And that is, as a husband, if you trust in your wife, you will have no lack of good for like the rest of your days. It's approximation. Definitely look some of these up afterwards. I think I got them all good, but look them up. So as a husband, you should never, for a vivid picture, you should never step on your wife in a leadership role. She is there to be your partner, in a way, a co-equal, and your best product in marriage would be working together as a team, understanding the idea of headship, though, that the wife's supposed to submit to the husband, but also that the husband's supposed to sacrifice for the wife. So we said enough about that. We'll keep moving on. We're getting closer. 2 more pages. I'm sorry. I really am. I didn't have time to run through this. I didn't know how long it was going to take, but we'll keep going. We're almost done. So another good practical piece is to work for the future. What is the next best move, is how like John likes to say it. And so often couples enter hardships, enter seasons. Maybe like your marriage is in a really hard season tonight, or maybe you've been there, and it could be different types of fidelity. You have adultery, and that's kind of where I think of divorce comes in. But you could have different types of fidelity. It could be physical infidelity. You could have financial infidelity. You can have social infidelity. You can have all these different types of infidelity, and really what it comes down to is it's a break of trust. Because when you got married, you agreed to be the ride or die partner with your spouse, meaning that no matter what happens, we're together. It's you and me first, and we're working to have a godly marriage, work together. And when marriages get into trouble, right, is when that trust is breached, whatever that might be. And sometimes it's too hard to break apart those different things at that moment. And the best action is to deal with the present and to work for the future. And then once you're into the future, you can develop some skills to kind of mine out the past and work through that. But often so many couples get caught up, well, you did this and you hurt me, and we got to figure it, you got to right this wrong before we can move forward. And then they never move forward, and it results in divorce. And so, like I said earlier, maybe not, divorce has its place and purpose, where I'll let you study that and come to that conclusion on your own. But as far as marriages go, there is nothing you as an individual can do. There is nothing that you've done that the love of Jesus can't cover. And so often, people feel like, well, maybe it's, past trauma, past abuse in your past. You bring stuff to your marriage. Maybe it's something that's happened in your marriage. Maybe you were unfaithful. Maybe you went out and spent a bunch of money and didn't tell your spouse about it, whatever, and you were untrustworthy. There is nothing you can do that the love of Jesus cannot cover, and that applies to your marriage. If 2 Christians are married together, they have the love of Jesus in their heart, they can recover from anything. And I'm not saying it's easy. I know, I've been blessed thus far. It's more of things that happen to us than things we've caused. I mean, we're definitely aren't perfect, so things happen. But for the most part in my marriage, we haven't done anything crazy. But I get it. It's hard. But the love of Jesus, his death on the cross, his sacrifice is enough to cover all sins, even in your marriage. And 2 Christians can come back from anything in a marriage if you trust in Jesus. But as John says, whether you have past trauma, whether you have, maybe your parents didn't show up for you as a kid, whatever, maybe you were unfaithful in your marriage in some way, it's not an excuse to keep doing it, to keep bringing things that are hurtful to your marriage, like fatal flaws, right? It's not an excuse, it's a context. So if you have things you need to deal with as an individual, or maybe you've made mistakes, you need to be actively working to be a better person so you can show up for your marriage. And that's part of Jesus's love and sacrifice and death is he did that so you can be better, whether you have stuff that you've caused or that has been done to you. So let's be working to rebuild trust if trust is needed. Let healing be where healing needs to be. And, like I said earlier, one of the best things you can do is you can be working on your marriage to develop skills that when hard seasons do show up, because they will show up no matter what they are, whether it's something you cause or happens to you, you can have the tools you need to have your marriage stand fast on God's foundation that he's laid out for you. So there's another book John's written. I didn't say the other book you written, but it's fine. You can look it up. Know your past, change your future, and kind of along those lines, right? In marriage, you have two people who have a past. They come together, and so they bring everything that is who they are to marriage. And some people have trauma. Some people are, not always right. Some people are a little rough around the edges, and you can. If you subscribe to the idea of soulmates or there are no soulmates, God has put your partner into your life and like God says this person's for you to marry, or you just think that any two people can get married and they're good to go. I think any marriage among two godly people can work, but I also think that God puts people in your life, and part of that free will is you can mess it up and they can leave, or maybe you get it right and you stay together and God help align things, orchestrate it to make that happen. So whatever you want to, however you subscribe on that, I won't argue those points. But ultimately, we can work to have good marriages. It doesn't have to be mediocre marriages. They can be good, godly marriages that are sacrificial, that are loving. And you don't have to wait until you're married to start. You can start preparing before marriage. You don't have to be married for 10 years to figure it out. You can start early. And if you're married for a long time and you're kind of old, you still got work to do. We're never perfect, right? But that's the whole idea of being a Christian, following Jesus, is we're constantly working, even in our marriages, to meet his standard and to follow him. So there's a lot more stuff. And actually, I kind of ran out of time to keep going, which is good because we're pretty over time, I think. And so there's some real quick ones, and maybe I'll get back up here if you guys want me to, and talk some more. But some quick other tools you need to learn how to do. Learn to grieve. We as a society have lost the capacity to grieve. We're really good at what do you call that? Distraction, right? We're really good at distraction. We're like, when there's loss, and you can grieve multiple things. It doesn't have to be someone dying to grieve it. We're really good at distraction, so we don't actually deal with our feelings. And we're really good at numbing. So like, social media, drugs, alcohol, whatever, we numb ourselves out. But we need to learn to grieve, because that's a vital tool in our marriage, because you need to learn to grieve individually and collectively, and understand that your spouse is going to grieve differently than you grieve. And you can grieve different things, right? If something happens, like for example, like let's say I got hit in the head and I got brain damage and I couldn't graduate college or something, I have to grieve the future of what I thought my life was going to look like, because it's going to be different. And so often marriages struggle because, man, this is supposed to be short. So often marriages struggle because spouses don't know how to grieve individually and together. So learn how to grieve. Another great other tool, I think I said this earlier, is other couples, right? We're blessed with having brothers and sisters, a great minister, elders. Don't be like me in the last 2.5 years. Reach out. Ask for help. It's okay. You don't have to do it by yourself. The idea that you can do everything by yourself is a lie from the devil. You can be strong. Strength is asking for help, right? Doing it yourself is not strength. It's being a coward, okay? So ask for help. And part of communication is sharing needs. Just like boundaries, you can't expect your spouse to meet what you don't share, right? If I have a need, if my wife Peyton has a need, and she doesn't tell me what that need is, if she doesn't help educate me to what her needs are, she can't, well, she can, but she shouldn't, all that fun stuff. I can't, shouldn't. be mad that a need's not being met if you don't share it, if you don't educate your spouse on what your needs are, and then also educate them on how they meet those needs, because guys were pretty like dense, right? And so like wife might say one thing, and you gotta paint me a pretty vivid picture for me to get it right, okay? So educate your spouses. Good point. So that's about what I have tonight. I'm sorry I can't even see the clock, so I don't know where I'm at. Ooh, 7 o'clock. Look at that. That's what I got for you tonight. And so maybe you and your spouse are in a hard spot right now. Maybe you guys have been through some hard spots and you're still working through recovering from that. Maybe you have a good marriage, but you still got room for improvement. Maybe you're not married and you're looking to become married one day. You can start working on that right now. But whatever it is, the love of Jesus is enough to cover your issues. The God created marriage to be good, to be joyful, to benefit you here on earth, not just spiritually for eternity. So whatever your need might be, if you need to come forward, please do come forward. If you don't, go home. Everybody needs to work on their marriage. I do. You do. And maybe you got stuff in your past you need to work on. Whatever it might be, don't go away tonight and do nothing. Do something. Even little baby steps, right? How do you eat a pie, right? One bite at a time. Same thing with fixing your marriage, right? Find something that you can work on and make it better. So with that, we'll have the invitation.